Svasik, even though you're not there in picture, I know you can hear me, and thanks again for bringing your students to the national finals. What a great experience it is for all of us, for your students, for you, and maybe in particular for us as judges. So I'd like to introduce myself. My name's Tom Vance, and I'm a professor of education at Kansas State University. And I've been hanging out in We the People for 30 years.
Hey, everybody. My name's Sean Arthurs. I'm a teacher and a lawyer, and I live just south of DC. And I'm looking forward to hearing about, looking forward to our discussion today and just having a nice little chat.
My name is Lawana Davis. I am a professor of law at Cumberland School of Law in Birmingham, Alabama. Welcome to the national finals.
And would you all please introduce yourselves to us?
Hi, my name is Bella Fiery. I'm a senior at Boonsboro High School, and after graduating, I plan on attending University of Maryland studying English second language education.
Hi, my name is Will Green, and I'm a senior at Boonsboro High School. After graduating, I plan on attending Hagerstown Community College and then transferring to East Carolina University for a degree in criminal justice.
Hello, my name is Lindsay Sparkman. I'm a senior at Boonsboro High School, and after graduation, I'm planning on attending the University of Maryland and studying environmental science and politics.
Welcome, everyone. And let's get started with the question, which is, of course, what challenge, the unit, which is what challenges might face American constitutional democracy in the 21st century. Your question is, President Dwight D. Eisenhower said, "We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. Do you agree or disagree? Why? What disagreements did the founders have about a standing army? And are they relevant today? To what extent should there be an international U.S. military presence?" You may begin.
We agree with President Eisenhower's statement that the excessive influence of the military-industrial complex should be closely watched and, if possible, prevented. Eisenhower was navigating uncharted territory in an age of nuclear weapons and international turmoil, and it arguably was the first time in American history in which a large military establishment was maintained during a time of supposed peace.
Eisenhower feared that a symbiotic relationship between the military and the private defense industry would jeopardize American security and liberty. Other critics of this relationship were worried of a connection forming between Congress and the military-industrial complex through lobbyists and donations.
Critics of the military-industrial complex theory have stated that the Cold War era military was very different from the military of today, and that a large defense budget is required to adequately deal with contemporary international issues.
However, the effects of Cold War militarism continue to shape modern society. The tension between the US and the Soviet Union allowed defense companies to border on war profiteering as the country stocked up on nuclear weapons, and the military-industrial complex did not simply disappear after the collapse of the USSR.
Defense conglomerates such as Lockheed Martin and Boeing continue to supply the military with much of their materials and donate money to politicians in exchange for favorable legislation.
The military-industrial complex wields economic and political power, some of which is necessary, but citizens and the government should work to decrease its power. James Madison addressed his thoughts regarding a standing army to the Constitutional Convention and Federalist 46.
Madison believed that the federal government would resemble the British monarchy if the Constitution allowed for a standing army to be at the disposal of the federal government, encouraging on the rights and liberties of the state governments.
Additionally, Samuel Adams wrote in 1776 that a professional army was always dangerous to the liberties of the people.
Both founding fathers believed that soldiers were likely to consider themselves separate from the populace and would be conditioned to obey commands unthinkingly.
Not all founding fathers agreed. Alexander Hamilton was in favor of creating a permanent militarized unit based on protecting the people. He justified this in Federalist 24, stating that the power over the national forces lies solely within the legislature because it consists of representatives of the people.
Hamilton also expressed his interest in a permanent army to oppose impending threats such as Britain and Spain.
The temptations for domestic oppression and the capability to engage in war with outside forces made the founding fathers conclude that such power should not reside in one individual.
The concerns regarding the abuse of military power is relevant in today's society with practices such as rendition, wherein military forces kidnap individuals and move them to government locations.
Furthermore, the Military Commissions Act strips detainees of their rights, even allowing prosecution based on evidence beaten out of a witness. Despite the military's vows to serve the United States as a symbol of peace and protection, numerous cases and violations of international laws have shown military presence domestically and abroad has the potential to extort violence.
Military presence abroad is a necessity for America and in the best interest of the common good. However, the U.S. military presence should be reduced to a size that is not deemed threatening to countries, and those countries should request our military and government influence.
Our military presence in the past decade has been viewed as threatening to Middle Eastern countries in particular. Our attempt to build democracy there has created tensions between the U.S. military and the citizens.
German citizens have been protesting Trump's proposed withdrawal of 12,000 American troops.
However, the Biden administration has halted withdrawal, indicating how quickly foreign policy can change. International organizations also influence foreign policy, especially NATO.
Due to our membership in NATO, we keep 1.35 million troops in our allied countries. Since we are also part of the UN, we contribute 70,000 soldiers to their causes.
The military presence has been used for the good of the people and will always be there for countries who want the U.S. to help them. Thank you for listening to our testimony. We are now ready for your questions.
Thanks, everybody. Let's put away our notes and then we're going to jump right in. So many different areas we can go to. Let's start with one pretty close to home. You know, Lafayette Square, just north of the White House. This past June, the highest ranking Army general was captured in a photograph with President Trump after protesters were cleared from the square, from Lafayette Square. Should the general have allowed himself to be in that photo or not? What do you think?
I think that by being in that photo and being in that situation in general and in that position, I think it shows a lack of dedication to serving the country and more of a focus on personal gain and pursuing things outside of your responsibility as a general. And I don't think that it was very professional, and it certainly didn't reflect well on him as a person and as a servant of the people. So I would say that that was an unfortunate situation, but one that he did put himself in, and one that hopefully sets a precedent for not, being that ally or being that close to, figures that represent a threat to democracy in such a way.
While I do agree with my colleague Lindsay, I think someone on a counter side could argue by being in that photo, you could see the clear connection and relationship between the commander-in-chief and those who are in the armed forces. And you could argue that with that clear connection and that clear, stable relationship between the two, it shows that how the commander-in-chief and the armed forces function as a unit. And if they were separate, it would be much harder to have that clear, stable relationship, which helps to uphold democracy.
But surely let's follow up on that. Surely there are some times when the military should not follow exactly what the commander-in-chief says, right? Like, so when are some times, don't just think about that example, when are there some times when the military should not do, or are there any? Let me start, are there any, right? When the military should not do exactly what the commander-in-chief or the president says?
Some recent examples that I can think of is when martial law was declared within the US during the Black Lives Matter protests, and there was direct orders to fire rubber bullets, tear gas, things like that. Personally, I don't think that the National Guard should have went through with that. They could have broken up those riots if they did deem violent. They could have broken those up without the excessive use of weapons, because it takes away the humanitarian effect and puts that aside, and they focus morely so on breaking up that protest rather than seeing what the individuals are actually gathering for. They're more so just following the orders that they were told.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Luana, any other times before we move, any other times or thoughts before we move on to the next question? Just wanted to see if there were any other. It's perfectly fine if it's not. And then Luana, whenever.
In President Eisenhower's speech, he talked about the concerns that he had about a government contract virtually becomes a substitute for intellectual curiosity. For every blackboard, there are now hundreds of new electronic computers. Should we now look at the military as a place that focuses more on that technology that President Eisenhower noted? And if so, should we reduce the numbers of people or the numbers of places where the United States military is present, given a new technological focus?
I believe if the U.S. military goes down that route, the technological route, I believe that we can reduce the size of the military and the places that we are located, and probably only have locations where we have close allies or close relations with said country. And with new technology, it can replace the jobs of many soldiers, so soldiers' lives can be spared in a time of war, which can be used with new technology.
I have a follow-up question to that, which is, given that focus, what is your position on the Space Force? What does the Space Force add in the military context in space?
I think Space Force personally is just another stepping stone for humanity to go out and adventure the grand scheme of the universe personally. And I think that having this militarized unit, we're already forming a order in space. So countries don't, when countries go up to space, we don't have conflict out in space personally.
Personally, I don't think that Space
Well,
Force is necessarily something that we need to have as a country. Maybe in the future, perhaps that could be something that's debated, and we might have something like that put in place. But as it stands, I don't know that Space Force is really a necessity, and especially if it comes at the cost of increasing the spending on defense and taking that money away from other projects that we could be pursuing at home, like improving, healthcare for people and making infrastructure better, things that we could focus on in our own country and on planet Earth. And I don't know that Space Force is really the best use of money or time, especially if we already have things like NASA in place. While not really with a defense perspective, they do, kind of have the monopoly on the space exploration and stuff. So I don't know that Space Force is really a necessity for our country and for the world.
When
I
is
agree
the,
with my colleague Lindsay. Oh, never
go
mind.
ahead, go ahead, Bill.
I was just going to say that I agree with my colleague Lindsay in the fact that I don't think Space Force is necessarily something that we need in modern society, because we did sign the treaty saying that we would never have a Space Force or an armed force within space. So the fact that we're pushing for the exploration of space and pushing for the potential to put militarized units in space is not so much for like innovation, but more so for the image of the fact that the US does have the capability to do that. So it spreads that we have the power and the innovations to do that. So I would agree saying that I don't necessarily believe it is necessary to have any.
When is the use of combat forces justified, in your opinion? And by combat forces, I mean not just troops, but also like missiles in a combative way. When is that justified?
I would say that it's justified in any case where any other prior means have failed, especially diplomatic attempts. Like if we can't or if we can't come to an agreement with whatever country or group that we're in conflict with, and we have exhausted any other means, especially troops just on the ground, I think that that would be a necessity if it's the last resort and there's no other way to deal with that threat.
What kinds of disagreements would qualify as being important enough to do that?
I would say that in any case where there has been a threat to the US and in a direct attack, that would be an appropriate response.
Thank you very much, Unit 6. Excellent presentation, and I wish we had more time to discuss. I have a whole bunch of other things that you pointed out in your prepared remarks that I would have loved to have explored further with you. You know, this is a challenging set of issues, right? I mean, our civilian control of the military and the relationship with our military and private defense contractors and so forth. And I thought you hit a lot of the right notes in both your prepared remarks and in your follow-up answers as well. And you know, my last question there, and we didn't really have enough time to really dig into it, but yeah, I think it's a reasonable question, especially given that Congress is by the Constitution, the war-making authority constitutionally. And yet, you know, in our most recent history, most of the time, it's not Congress that's giving the okay. I mean, we sort of have this. It's kind of complicated. We do have a broad use of force thing that's in that Congress passed after 9/11. But even before that, though, the executive branch has had lots of power. So anyway, excellent job. And I really appreciate your ideas and thank you again for bringing your students to the national finals.
Yeah, I also echoed Tom's sentiments there, and then we just wanted to say thank you. I know very wide ranging, and we could go into any of it. Really appreciated your willingness to push back on when the military should say no. I mean, that's a tricky question. My one suggestion on that would be if you, and I know you're thinking on your feet, so this is kind of like, you know, it's hard to give this, but it's always good to give some suggestions that might help you going forward. If you can extract principles from the specific example. So for example, Bella, I think you talked about the National Guard firing and using rubber bullets. So if you could go to the bigger principle and say, anytime you're causing harm or violence against civilians or something, you know, whatever the principle that you believe in. So it was a great example. And again, I know it's hard to do on your feet, but you know, we always want to give you these aspirations, right? Keep you challenging. You've all got promising careers ahead of you, and appreciate you showing up at the Nationals this year.
I agree with my colleagues, and I wanted to point out your excellent historical background that kind of grounded all of this, and your discussion of the founders and Federalist Papers and all of those things. I think they're absolutely vital to what We the People is about. I would say you've got a lot packed into that opening statement. I mean, a lot of different issues to pull out. And I might say, you know, try to see, okay, how can we can reincorporate some of that into our answers as we are answering the questions, because you had a lot of great points there.
All right, thank you.